Hi, everybody. My name is Pete Elliott. I'm Director of Marketing for the company and Key Information Systems. I just want to, first of all, thank everybody for taking time out of their busy schedule. I know everybody's hunkered down with the last of the quarter business, and I appreciate the time you're going to spend with us today. We are honored to have Steve Fennis with us, the Power Systems HA Product Manager from IBM, direct from beautiful Rochester, Minnesota with us, and of course Dr. Terry Boulay is with us as well, who is Head of Business Development. Also, he's an expert in System I. So who are we? Key has offices all over California, Arizona, also now in Colorado. We're primarily a business partner, premier business partner with IBM, and we also have other solutions that we provide with N-Series, NetApps, Cisco, Brocade, that kind of thing. We have a great technical staff, a great architectural team that helps customers architect solutions, as well as a professional services group. And so what is our focus? Our focus basically, obviously, a lot of people ask me, what do you do? We take real software and hardware and make it work for customers. Some of the software you look at here on this on slide is, VMware. We work with VMware. We work with Tivoli, WebSphere, some of the IBM stack, if you will, servers. Obviously, we provide a full line of servers from IBM with the exclusion of we don't do any mainframe, but we do specialize in doing virtualization, server consolidation. Obviously, the System I, i7, AIX, Windows, Linux. We do a lot of storage. We're great on storage, understanding the complexities of storage, and with that comes archiving. Networking, also we have a great networking staff working with us, specializing also in Brocade and Cisco, and also a professional services group. And some of the customers we work with, there's a kind of a list. We work with well-known customers and small customers, big and small and in between. So anyway, that is that's my pitch. I want to thank everyone again. At the end of this, we'll go into Q&A. Q&A is also great for everyone because it gives us an idea of the breadth and the scope and scale of what we're doing. And I'm going to turn it now over to Mr. Fennis. So Steve, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Pete. Let me bring up my screen here. All right, thanks everybody for attending with us. And I like Pete mentioned, I'm the product manager for product offering manager for the PowerHA, and also I should mention the CBU. I am pretty sure that all of the customers listening on this call do use the CBU for I. As you see from my title, I'm talking about the PowerHA System Mirror 7.1, although the concepts, the discussion are also applicable to 6.1. I think the interesting point is we're on to release number 2 of the PowerHA product. A little background here, we've been working on this technology for going on 12 years. And, the reason it took us until 6.1 to introduce the full end-to-end product is because early on, our engineers and architects were busy, let's say, modifying and arranging the storage management and disk management subsystems so that it would be accommodating clustering. And in fact, all of you today have the binaries down in the SLIC kernel of the I operating system that enables the ability to do clustering. So your memory and disk management system is already you're already using it. You just haven't enabled it for PowerHA. I just think that's kind of an interesting observation to make. But I'm going to go in and talk now about the 7.1 product offering, but at the same time just recognize it also applies to the 6.1 pretty much. I'll talk about some of the differences. First, I just wanted to point out the strategy for the Power Systems organization is to increasingly deploy software as being a key aspect of our product offerings, and that's what this page is about. The Power VM, the virtualization, the dynamic optimization, dynamic energy optimization. The resiliency piece, the PowerHA piece, is a key part of this. And on the AIX side, I have the PowerHA for AIX products as well. has been tremendously successful, and in fact, we came in first for the first half of the year in growth. And why should you care about this? The reason you should care is because we're investing. We are investing very aggressively into this technology. And so you ought to have some level of comfort in the sense that this is strategic going forward. And PowerHA is a key part of that strategy. I should also tell you as well that in the PowerHA on AIX side, we just made an announcement in August on our 7.1, which is called, it was really featuring what's called the Cluster Aware AIX. And the reason we call it that is because the AIX operating system was modified to be, let's say, synchronous or to be in harmony with the PowerHA, which really pulls the primitives down into the kernel, which results in a lot more, let's say, stability and usability and a new director interface and all of this. And the PowerHA and I is that basically the same product only implemented in the I environment. It's the same basic set of ideas. You know, we in the Unix world, we call the volume group that's made resilient, we call it the logical volume. We call it, in the I world, we call it the independent auxiliary storage pool. And I'll point out some of these things as we go through because I've got some AIX things scattered here. But the bigger point I'm making is that this technology, this storage-based technology for resiliency, is well established in the Unix world. We're a little late to the game, you might say, but on the other hand, we have been working at this, like I said, for well over a decade. And 6.1, which we announced in, let's see, what was it? I think it was January of 2008, is where we introduced the first end-to-end product. And this is a complete end-to-end product. And just now in, let's see, it was April, we announced the second version, which is PowerHA 7.1. So that's a little background. The PowerHA System Mirror product family is, number one, it's for high availability solutions. And again, like I said, it's a complete end-to-end solution. It's developed in what's called the editions structure, and I will share that with you in a few minutes. That's one of the distinctions between PowerHA 6.1 and PowerHA 7.1, and I will talk about that. In 7.1, I introduced the concept of the standard and enterprise edition and the pricing that goes by tiers. And at that point, at the 7.1 release, both the PowerHA on AIX and on I are the product structuring, the pricing is the same. And you'll see even on my charts, if I talk to one product versus the other, the messaging is fundamentally the same. That's a pretty important move because it enhances the efficiency across the world in all the, the business partner channels and the IBMers. And I'm already seeing that. I got a call yesterday from one of my business partners that specializes in PowerHA on AIX sales, and lo and behold, he's got an I client. So it's definitely paying off. The fundamental resiliency is based on what we call shared storage clustering technology, and that's kind of a mouthful, but let's put it this way: that your PowerHA on I technology, like I said, it's deployed in the SLIC. It's down in the kernel. Our kernel in the I is the SLIC code, if you will, and so all of the resiliency aspects, when we do replication or mirroring, it's literally disk level replication. Now, the reason we call it shared storage clustering is because you can connect a shared pool of disk to two systems, and that pool is switchable. And in the case of the I, that pool is called the independent auxiliary storage pool. All right, I put this chart together particularly for my I clients to make sure that I'm being very crisp on what I'm talking about here and what this offering is about. And the first point is this is a complete solution. This is our IBM Power System solution for IBM I for both high availability and disaster recovery. The focus is, of course, 24/7 application availability through planned and unplanned outages. And the message for both AIX and I is that this is a deeply integrated extension of the host operating system and kernel technology, or in the case of I, the SLIC technology. And that is a key differentiator, whether I'm talking to a Unix client who's looking at a cross-platform solution, or whether I'm talking to an I solution or I client I really want to emphasize the point that this solution is a deeply integrated, it is an extension of our memory and our disk management subsystem. It's based on clustering technology, point number 2. Now, what clustering, in essence, what clustering does is it creates a set of resources which are available to all of the nodes in the cluster or the systems. So, for example, that switchable disk pool or that mirrored or replicated disk pool is a resource available to all of the users and to the application regardless of which system it happens to be running on. The cluster also provides monitoring of resources, i.e. if something is going to fail or does fail, what the clustering enables is the change from the primary resource to the secondary resource, and what that nets out to is automation. So my clients, they do regular role swap operations. In fact, this technology is designed for role swap operations and automated failovers. And that's the beauty of clustering. And it is, of course, as I said before, the clustering technology as well is an extension of the core operating system. The storage-based resiliency, like I said before, it is an extension of the host operating system. More importantly, or I should say as importantly, an extension of the memory and disk management subsystem. The storage volumes are either switchable between systems, and in the case of the I, that would be in the case where I've got a storage server and I've got switchable, I'm using switchable LUNs. I have my ISP deployed via switchable LUN so that I've got both systems are sharing that LUN, only one owns it at a time, and so we can switch back and forth. And then, of course, the next level up is the mirroring level, and so that's when we go to what we call multi-site operations, and in 7.1 we call that the Enterprise Edition. But here's what I really want to point out on this. There are two ways to deploy replication using storage. The first bullet is called host-based replication. That's the native mirroring technology. In the case of the I, it's the I mirroring technology. So it doesn't care what the disk subsystem is. The answer is yes, you can use internal disk. And we've got hundreds of customers around the world using internal disk and the host-based mirroring technology, which is called geo-mirroring. All right? So internal disk, geo-mirroring. External disk, we call that storage-based replication, and that is metro mirror or global mirror. Now, let me talk for another second here on the difference between metro and global and the two flavors of geo-mirror. There's two technologies, synchronous and asynchronous. My rule of thumb, particularly to I clients who tend to run batch jobs that have heavy I/O, is that you look at the distance of around 40 kilometers, and that's about where you start to think, am I going to need to go to a global mirror or a geo-mirror asynchronous technology? Because in an asynchronous technology, we do the write locally, and then the clustering technology takes over and does the synchronization in the background and continuously creates consistency points on the remote system. Now, if I can do synchronous, I will always do synchronous, because then I've got two identical copies on the two systems, and that's why in the storage-based resiliency technology, you don't have the notion of out-of-sync conditions, because you think about it just as mirroring to a disk subsystem. You wouldn't think about whether or not the two copies were in sync. By definition, you're depending on the whole mirroring technology to make sure that happens, and it's the same case here. So as data gets replicated, or I'm sorry, as data gets paged from disk to the storage subsystem in the storage pool, ISP, that data is simultaneously mirrored to another ISP, and it's linked to the state of the application. All right, so for every I/O the application is doing that's synchronous, it waits just as it would for a disk I/O and a mirrored subsystem on a single system. So you're always in a state ready to do a role swap. And so, again, geo-mirror, host-based, and metro mirror and global mirror, storage-based. And geo-mirror comes both in my PowerHA website on the overview page, I have an interview there with one of our customers out of Minneapolis, Catco, a guy named Jim Horn, and he pretty well illustrates that very clearly. They do roll swap operations once a week on Saturday, and it's completely automated. It basically sends them messages to their cell phone that the roll swap operation to the backup, and then they run there for some time and they roll swap back and they get notified. So it's automation, and I think equally as important is minimal IT operations involvement. You know, this is I don't know if I should use this word. This is sort of a mechanism, right? You set this up, and it's going to run. And you're not going to be doing things like are the primary and secondary systems in sync. This is technology designed for roll swap operations. And absolutely the clients that I have doing this, and I've got quite a few now around the world, they do roll swap operations, and they do them regularly. All right, what's our overall strategy? As I said earlier, a key piece to the strategy is the deep integration. And we introduced cluster-aware AIX here in let's see, it was August 17. And it's a pretty big deal because in the AIX world, or in the Unix world in general, these solutions operate in what's called a user space. But now our cluster primitives, we pull them down into the kernel. It's interesting because I realize I'm looking at this, I'm going, you know, our HASR, sometimes known as option 41, the cluster primitives, we started out with the deployment in the kernel from the very beginning. So I'm saying, all right, in the I world, we also have cluster-aware I. That was our starting point. We both AIX and we arrived at the same place, just by different paths. But it's a key piece. You know, I can't let's say, overemphasize the point that all the technology from memory management to disk subsystems to clustering is, and you know, if clients on the phone right now, if they're running in 5.4, you've got most of the cluster primitives already, and your memory and disk subsystem architecture, it's all set up for this as we speak. You need to have cluster-wide OS operation. That's kind of a given. It's almost needless to say that the whole point of a cluster is to have groups of systems behave as one resource for the application and users. And along with the deep integration is it's deployed vis-a-vis SLIC, or in the case of AIX, kernel technology. Our goal and continuous investment and focus is ease of deployment and ease of use. You know, in the I, we just announced the system director-based deployment. In the I, we have the director-based, and we'll have a director-based plugin in a coming release. I also want to mention on the I side, we have advanced copy services for PowerHA, which is a lab services offering that when we've got customers out there that basically deploy the lab services team and go and set up the cluster, I'll talk about that a bit later on, but that's also a piece of the strategy. The other piece of the strategy is to do multi-site disaster recovery capabilities, i.e. we're not only going to focus on the data center, we're going to also focus on multi-site, and I'm seeing that as an increasing requirement in both the Unix and I market. Of course, the I market, I would have to say we've always had a heavy requirement for multi-site capability, but I just want to point out is that we want to be able to do easy roll swap operation between sites as well as in the data center, and that's exactly the whole point of the PowerHA offering. And then the solution package optimization, which that strategy element, really I finished the execution of that with the announcement of PowerHA on I, PowerHA System Mirror on I 7.1, where, like I said, the two packages for AIX and I are now identical. And to that point, this is the offering. This is the way it's set up. And just for the fun of it, this is the I offering, and I'm going to flash ahead for a second and show you the AIX offering. It should look pretty much the same. In fact, they are the same. The only difference is the actual PID. You know, because the binaries for the I offering go on the I operating system, and the binaries for the AIX go on the AIX. So they're not the same. You can't run, you know, the PowerHA System Mirror AIX on an I and vice versa. So I want to make that clear. What I'm talking about is that the two offerings have been completely harmonized or standardized, let's say. Now let's talk about, this is kind of an important point on this whole offering. The first point I want to make is this is priced per processor core. So, I'm only going to license the partition that's going to be involved in high availability. So let's say I had 16 cores, and of those 16 cores, 8 were going to participate in high availability. I would license for 8. And I would, so if it was a small tier, it'd be 2,500 times 8. If I was, and for the data center, if I was going to go multi-site, I'd use the Enterprise Edition, and it'd be 3,200 times, or 3,250 times 8. Now, if I were going to go multi, and then the second piece is, I'm going to tell you, you should be using the CBU. It's, it's got tremendous advantages, and like I said, I'm pretty sure all of the clients on this call do use the CBU offering. And that's pretty interesting as well. So on my corresponding partition on that CBU, I'm going to license one iOS, one 5250, and one PowerHA. So in the scenario I just laid out, I got 8 active on the primary, I've got 8 active on the CBU, I've got 9 PowerHA licenses. So another really big savings. The other piece I want to point out is the software maintenance aspect. When you buy PowerHA, the first year software maintenance is baked into the price, and then every year after that, it's the standard IBM software maintenance offering, which is roughly 20%. I say roughly because it depends whether you buy 1, 2, or 3-year extensions. You get a little better deal for 3, but roughly 20% to do software renewal. Like a 1-year renewal is 20% of the base offering to renew, and that's all in the that's out in the configurator, the AAS ordering system. So that is fixed. You're not going to find any surprises on software maintenance. That's the way we do it. I also want to point out one other thing here, and if you look down in bold, when you go to 7.1, option 41 is included. That's a feature of the operating system. HASR, it'd be, when you look in the operating system, you'd find it by SSI or SS1 HASR, often called option 41. Now you need to have that because that's the kernel, right? That's the stuff that activates the the switchable resources and so forth. So that's a prerequisite. In 6.1, you buy that on a per system basis. I'm going to guess that most of you already own it because we used to include it with the what was called back in the day, a long time ago, not anything related to this, but we used to have this thing called the Enterprise Edition, and it had a stack of software in it that came with it. And so as I'm talking to especially the larger clients, but really almost everybody has it at least on at least one server. So check your system. You may likely already own it on at least one of your systems. But that is, in 6.1, you need to purchase that. In 7.1, it comes at no charge with the PowerHA offering. Now, another aspect, though, is if you go back to 6.1 and you look at this chart I have right here, there is no such thing as a standard and Enterprise Edition. It's all one. So, but let's just pretend there was. If there was, every one of those boxes would be priced at $3,200 list price. So you see what I went from was $3,200 for anything and everything to this price structure. And and also the way I set it up is that when you go from 6.1 to 7.1, you can go to any, whether standard, enterprise. You'll be small, medium, or large depending on what machine you have. But let's suppose you're large. If you have deployed PowerHA in 6.1, you can go straight to the Enterprise Edition as long as your software maintenance is concurrent. So that's how that works. And once again, here's my AIX offering structure, and as you see, they're priced the same. And to keep this discussion to 30 minutes, I left off a lot of charts. But if I were to show you my messaging and marketing charts for the two product offerings, they're almost identical. They start to differentiate when you get into some storage that's attached and diving down into some of the operating system aspects. But from an overall messaging and construct, it's the same. And the reason is because it's fundamentally the same basic idea. All right, now what I did is I'm a little more graphical picture here for the CBU because I am also the product manager for the CBU offering. And I just showed an example here. In those little boxes, you see the primary and the CBU down there. And the rectangular box around the 4 processors is symbolic of a partition. And so, and I want to repeat that, like the way you think about this is your HA environment will be per partition. So you could have 2, 3 partitions on there. Maybe 2 of them are involved in HA and 1 of them isn't. Now, over on the CBU, I've got a corresponding partition. And I've got, as I was describing before, you can see I've got 1 processor that's licensed. And it's got, it's got the iOS, it's got the PowerHA. And the other thing is I want the temporary keys. All right? So on the 3 gray ones that are active, you need to get the temp keys, and that's no problem because the temp keys are no charge. But basically what it enables you from a purely economic perspective, you see in this picture I'm licensing 5 processor cores, and the 3 are on standby. And just to clarify something else that I often get questions on, notice for the sake of illustration, I put an AIX core running up outside of those, outside of that PowerHA CBU environment, and I can do that because I can run, on those cores. If I have an active core, I can put Linux on it. I can put AIX on it. That's because you own that core. The PowerH or the CBU agreement only pertains to the high availability environment and the partitions that are going to be switched back and forth. And interestingly enough, with PowerHA, you will be switching back and forth on a regular basis. I did the same configuration for AIX, and really the only difference between the 2 scenarios, because in AIX world you don't need a CBU, but I can do the same thing as long as I'm containing the primary and secondary to LPARs, and then I use the PowerHA collapses or expands the secondary and collapses the primary so that I'm always in compliance. But since I've got I customers on this call, it's just for sake of illustration. All right, I mentioned the advanced copy services, and prior to 6.1, we had what was called Advanced Copy Services. Let's see, what was it called? Advanced Copy Services Toolkit is what it was called. And I have about 100 clients around the world that were set up in that environment in 5.3 and 5.4. And so those customers now are in the process of moving up to the PowerHA. And in our team, our lab services team, we developed an offering because all the new technology, all the advanced, the way we actually map the storage and address space, we modified at 6.1 for reasons of efficiency. There's a number of things that we've done that makes the product, like I said, in 6.1 a complete end-to-end product. And so the lab services team developed this offering around 6.1 and going forward. And it's, as you can see, it's dedicated to the storage server environment. And the key benefit, in my mind, is that it wrappers both the PowerHA cluster and the storage into one offering and gives you one user interface. So I can be conducting the flash copies. I can be conducting the roll swap, the failover, just from one user interface. So it makes it very usable. And you notice at the top, if I have internal disk, well, that's only PowerHA because Advanced Copy Services for PowerHA, that is a creature of the DS8000. And also we do have a DS5000 edition, but that one is not automated to the level that it's got different characteristics than the DS8000 offering. And and it can only, if you want to do the DS5000, it can only be attained through the Advanced Copy Services option. This picture is symbolic of what a lot of clients are doing today. And I show to illustrate what we with LUN level switching. You see in the data center I've got a couple of 795s sitting there hooked up to a DS8000, and I'm showing the symbolic flash copy. I could as well be doing the flash copy at the remote system, but you see I'm doing a switchable ISP locally in the data center, and then I have global mirror going off to a remote location. All of this is under one cluster. So I'm able to switch my application and users between any of the nodes in that cluster. And in that picture, there's 3 nodes in that cluster. 2 are in the data center, and 1 is remote. And this is a variation. I mean, there's all sorts of different variations. And by the way, I'll remind people again, this is not only for external storage. It's also for internal storage. But when you get up, I think when you're looking at over a certain number of terabytes, you start getting up into the, the 780, 770. I think people should be looking at the external storage option because it's more robust. And I'll talk to that in a second here. But this is a classic picture. I've got a lot of the banks are doing this, because they want to do the minimal switching operations data center. And at the same time, I'll say this as well. I've got clients like, for example, Estes Trucking, who only has global mirror. So they have a primary and secondary location, and they are only doing global mirror. And when you're doing a planned role swap operation, the characteristics are the same whether it's global or metro, whether it's async or sync, because you are managing the process. The trade-off between async and sync really comes to if there's an unplanned outage. The trade-off you're making to get distance is there'll be some data lost in the pipe. So you might end up at the other system with a loss of, a few seconds or so of data, however many. And it depends, how long the pipe is and so forth and so on. But that's the trade-off. And that's something we can't get away from. It's just the way, the nature of synchronous versus asynchronous and distance. Chart 12 shows the portfolio here of solutions, and the upper rectangular box with the 3 pictures in it is that's the PowerHA System Mirror offering. And the top one is the LUN-level clustering, and I do need a storage server for that. I can't do switch disk with internal disk. With internal disk, I go to the geo-mirroring cluster there, and I show geo-mirror. And as I mentioned, async mode was made available in April. And by the way, I'll tell you this, I've got a number of customers that have gone straight to 7.1 specifically to use async mode. And one of our partners that works closely with Terry and company he did the betas on those and has got some customers up and running right now. And so far, everything's been going quite well. So internal disk, think geographic mirroring. And just as a reminder, we used to say, a lot of people used to say cross-site mirroring. And but really the technology is geo-mirroring. Then you have the Metro Mirror, Global Mirror on the right-hand side using the storage servers. And here's a piece I want to illustrate with this current architecture. So in the left side, if I'm going to do a backup to tape, I'm going to vary on that secondary node. And then at that time, I'm not mirroring. So during the period of save to tape, I could be exposed to an outage, right? So I'm going to vary on the secondary node. I'm going to do the save to tape, bring it back in, and the cluster will resync the changed objects that occurred during that hour period. And then on the right side, if you look over at the Metro Mirror architecture, the neat thing about this is if I take one of the systems offline, the cluster will just simply switch over to the other server and reverse the direction of the mirroring. And so you're always running under protection, even though you take a system out of one of the production systems out of the picture. And then, of course, flash copy gives you the ability to create a secondary copy in literally seconds. Very popular technology with people, using external storage. It's very popular. Now, in the lower left-hand corner, I just want to mention iCluster. And I want to make sure people understand this is not a PowerHA technology. iCluster is a journal-based replication product. It's the traditional, shall I say, legacy way that we did HA in the I space for years and years. So I just want to make sure people don't get confused. This is the journal-based software replication type of a product. And then on the right-hand side, I just show the basic copy services because every now and again someone will ask me what's the difference between doing global or Metro Mirror in that picture versus the one right above it. And the difference is the picture up in the PowerHA is set up for a cluster, which means when I do a failover or a role swap over to a secondary node, there is no IPL involved. If I were doing a full system replication, as I'm down in that lower picture, there's an IPL involved to get to the second system. This picture is really just to illustrate, the key points. What am I talking about what's the advantages of the PowerHA? A list of things. Well, the first one is your whole skill base, your I operators skill base isn't learning a different application that does some sort of HA or DR environment. It's extending its current skill to be able to do HA clustering. It's basically taking advantage of the stuff we've built into the operating system. Of course, you get IBM service and support. You get the director interface. It's based on IBM storage. as we talked about earlier, the storage-based resiliency, whether internal or external disk. Remember, it's sector-based replication going on. Cluster-wide resilient devices, that's a characteristic of a cluster. IBM state synchronization. Part I didn't talk about because of the limitation of time. The other objects, the data and application objects go into this storage pool called an independent auxiliary storage pool. The other application environment objects like user profile, security, things like this go up into the admin domain. And the admin domain monitors those objects on all of the nodes in the cluster. Say 2 nodes, 3. And if a change occurs, that data isn't replicated physically, like in the software replication, there's a save and restore. No, there's a server job monitoring, and he sees the change, mentions it to the other, tells the other nodes that change is made, they make the change. So that data isn't physically replicated. The only data that's physically mirrored or replicated is the data in the storage pool, the ISP storage pool. So you get the point. You can go look through this. We've got host-based mirroring, right, for internal disk, and then Metro and Global Mirror for our storage servers. And then I do have customers. I got a lot of customers, in fact. I'm estimating at this point I've got close to 1,000. And I really want to emphasize the point that this is not experimental any longer. We've got some major corporations that you would all have heard of, including one I know you've all heard of called IBM. That went ahead and deployed this technology for the manufacturing. But there's the large user group; those clients are moving, and so I've got this is well baked. And going prior to the PowerHA 6.1 with the copy services toolkit that was out there. So we've had a lot of people using this around the world, a lot of big institutions, and a lot of small institutions. It's interesting, like up in Sweden and Germany, there's just been a real changeover. This one happens to be a bank up in Sweden that was doing software replication, and they went over to this technology, and they love it. It works. Catco is out of Minneapolis. I'd mentioned that before, and if anybody wants to go and listen to that interview, it is out there. I've also got the audio on my laptop. If someone wanted it, I'll just send it over to you. But Jim Horn was gracious enough to actually do a public webcast with me, and I love it. I mean, it was just great. What he was talking about was, how they do automated role swaps once a week. How, they, when I asked him what's the kind of weekly maintenance you need to do, and he said, well, basically nothing. And what kind of skills? Well, it's basically your eye operating skills. And Osner's another client up in Sweden. And these two, what I'm pointing out, these are smaller end customers, and I just want to emphasize, here's Svenska Handelsbanken, they're using storage servers, but these other two clients are using internal disks. So I just want to point out, this isn't just for the big external disk guys, it's also for the internal. And of course, the majority of what I'm seeing out there is the smaller end clients, because obviously that's where most of our install base is. And just one last mention on the iCluster. Again, as I said before, this is not part of the HADR, PowerHA family. This is it's the traditional journal-based replication technology. And the only thing I'm pointing out is at the last bullet, there's this thing called HA Assist that the lug asked me to offer, which for some environments, they might have objects like System 36 objects that don't go into an ISP. So they asked me, can we have a replicator for that? And so I did. Put that out there. And what it is iCluster repackaged, and it comes. If you can acquire it if you own PowerHA. You can acquire this HA Assist, and it's at a fixed price of $5,000 a system. In the vast majority of cases, 99.9% of the time, you don't need any software assist of any sort. Okay, and I think that is what I was going to say. We talked about the PowerHA offering. Standard for the standard edition for the data center, enterprise edition for multi-site. We have the small, medium, large tiers. I should probably mention that too. The large tier would be the 795, the 780. Medium tier would be the 770. The small tier would be everything else, the 720s, the 550s, the 750s, the blade servers. The enhanced capabilities that came with 7.1 was the GeoMirror async mode and level switching, and then we did a number of architectural enhancements that you don't know about or see, but it's on the insides that made the whole solution just a lot more easy to use. And then, of course, there's the advanced copy services for PowerHA, and that is being widely deployed around the world. And you know, if you're looking at storage servers, I encourage you to take a look at it. You get the expertise of some really great architects, as well as you get that wrappered solution. And then additional resources, probably the thing to point out here would be the Red Books. You know, if you're interested, grab those 2 most recent Red Books. We got the lab services folks there, or check out the PowerHA website. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Terry.
Thank you, Steve. Hold on for a second, show my screen. Good. And I want to also state that your title is Worldwide Product Offering Manager for PowerHA, right, Steve?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Okay. What I want to do is just take a few minutes. I know we only got a few minutes left here. And just state some of my experiences, what's happened so far. If I look on the first slide here, this is your typical environment that you have from a technical point of view. And when you do regular, quote unquote, replication, everything is stuck into sysbase. And so all of these 3 folders over here, those would be your sysbase objects. The ones on the right, okay, those are typically your files and those kind of things. And so when you mirror everything in Logical, you do it through database journaling or audit journals. On the next slide, what you do, and this is what the customer said to us, is what do I need to do to get to PowerHA? And so what we did is, in their particular case, they were doing the logical replication. We took the target and undid it and created an independent ASP. And so in this particular example, you see your sysbase down below, and then all your programs, files, and all those other type of objects. And I got a slide here in a few minutes that lists all the object types that can go into the independent ASP. And then as part of the PowerHA, everything in the independent ASP gets mirrored over to the other side. With the regular replication, you get to pick and choose. With this one, everything gets taken over regardless of what you do on the box. If you go in and you want the ultimate of what IBM has to offer, then you go into this particular example where I have my iSeries on the left, and then if I connect in the storage solution to this, there's some advantages that you get to do in here. The first one is with the independent ASP, you either get to vary it on, vary it off, or switch it. And so in the case of a high availability example, I can switch the entire ASP from LPAR1 to LPAR2 in this example. In the other cases, what I can do is I can take the independent ASP, and in this example I called it Terry ASP, and I think you guys can see my mouse here. And the PowerHA takes it over to the other side identically. Now, one of the things that you get in the advantages here that isn't always talked about is if you have terabytes of data here, you can actually flash that independent ASP in just seconds, and you have a complete copy of it, because what it does is it keeps track of the pointers. It doesn't keep track of the data. And so one of the advantages you get by doing this is if you wanted to flash something and then run your batch, and batch messed up something, you can take your flash and flip it back within a second. And so that's one of the advantages you get, is you can flash a copy and then test and do things. And this picture here is kind of the ultimate of what everybody would like to move toward. In the next slide here, everything in sysbase, what Steve talked about is you have 2 options. If you're going to mirror within sysbase, you have the admin domain or the HA assist. The other option that you can do that's not listed is you can save many of the different objects into a save file, stick them into the independent ASP, and then the ASP automatically takes it across to the other side. And there's the different examples there on this slide. From a technical point of view, we covered the sysbase. And what typically is in there that you're looking at there is your user profiles, system values, security, those kind of things. In the independent ASP, that's where all your other data is going into, and that's where the hardware and the PowerHA is mirroring everything within that. This is a slide I know Steve covered a little bit: geographic mirroring, metro mirroring, global, and the flash. Those are your 4 types of options: the geographic, metro, global, and flash. Here's a slide of all the object types that are supported. You can see there, in there you got your different files, your libraries. All of those object types get put in the independent ASP, and that gets mirrored to the other side. This is the screen of the unsupported, and so this is the different objects that the admin domain is going to take care of. And if you take a look at the lower right over here, you notice there's your user profiles and those kind of things. These are the objects that can be mirrored with the admin domain. This is another slide I took from IBM. The authorization list, once again, down there, the user profiles, the printers, the different network configurations. Those are the things within the admin domain, which is part of the PowerHA. The first question is, what does this take to do this? What I said before is what we did is we took the target machine of a customer, and we created an independent ASP, and then we did a save of their production system, which was all of SysSpace, and then we restored the appropriate pieces into the independent ASP. And then for the next 4 days, what we did is we went through and we looked at the namespace, which you can think of it in your head as different library lists of where do I need to run this from SysSpace or this independent ASP, and go through the different job descriptions and say, what does this take to run? And so the creates and saves of libraries now, there'll be a parameter in there that says, do I want to do this in SysSpace or do I want to do it in the independent ASP? And so most of the work down here at the bottom really involves pointing the jobs to the independent ASP. And once again on this slide, what my goal to do is the location of the different application objects, right? Because now I'm looking at the data journals, the receivers, all those different things to make the job run. What do I need to do to get them to look at the ASP? Once again, what is the effort of work? It's really, what do I have to do to get my jobs to run, and those the different categories on that one. The auto start jobs, the pre-start jobs, your job descriptions, your submit jobs, and your job Ds. So it's all about what does it take to run the job and point it to the independent ASP. In this case, when we were talking about the migration of the project, what we did for this customer, that process, we created the ASP on a Sunday. We came in on Monday, restored everything into the independent ASP, and then for the next 3 days, next 4 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we ran all of the different batch jobs, the automatic jobs, the pre-start jobs, and by Thursday at 5 o'clock, they had tested everything and it was proven. So for them, what they did is they left their production in SysSpace because they wanted to do a migration evolution, and they did the logical replication from the SysSpace over to this brand new target, if you will, that had their application and everything set up in the independent ASP. And so you can groom the process to where you can get everything set for the independent ASP. And here's the kind of the project outline on this: education, performing all the tests, and really integrating the changes into the independent ASP system. Here's some examples. I took this from IBM of the different vendors that are doing the independent ASP. And there's the different resources here. In a nutshell, this is where IBM is headed, getting your applications into the independent ASP and letting the hardware and the PowerHA mirror it to the other side, because all those processes then make it easy to test your role swaps and your disaster recoveries and those kind of things. And so with that, thank you.
All right, so we're going into my favorite section, which is the Q&A section. And so if you are going to, if you'd like to ask a question, what you do is you go to questions and write the question, and I will ask the question either to Terry or Steve. First question I have is, and it's open to either one of you guys. How long will this process take to implement? Give us a kind of a range of what it's going to take to implement this thing. Steve, do you want to answer that, or Terry, who?
Steve, you want to try first?
Well, you mean to set up the PowerHA environment, I think.
Yeah, to get it up.
How long does it take to implement it?
And you know, of course, the answer is, the universal IBM answer is, it depends. But yeah, I mean, you know, like you said, Terry, you know, some of these things can go over a weekend. It really has to do with how, you know, for example, like let's say it's an SAP. SAP is enabled for the ISP architecture. So when I talk to my, you know, particularly the folks in Germany who've been doing this, you know, for the last couple of years, they talk about a Saturday afternoon kind of a deal, because the application is pre-set up. So their installation process is very speedy. Now, if it's an application environment that's very complex and we got a lot of things to address regarding, say, certain application things that were certain data that was put in the application library that didn't belong in there, then it's going to be a longer process. So there's a number of factors involved, but it could be anywhere from a weekend type of a deployment to a multi-week deployment that extends over, say, a couple months. So it really is completely dependent on the customer environment.
Yeah, it depends on how many different applications you're running also. I'd say on average it's 2 to 3 weeks to test the different environments. And, that could take up to 4 weeks also.
Okay, I have another question here. Do you plan on putting all the sys-based objects into the IaaS?
No, we would never do that because that's the data that is the property of the application on each of the nodes. And so we don't want to physically replicate that data. We just simply want the sys-based data to be available to the application and the user on the secondary node. But no, it'll never be put. We simply would not do that. And by the way, the same analogy would hold true in the AIX world. You put your data and application down in the LVM, and that's what's mirrored and replicated and so forth. And the other data is the monitored data. So it's quite the same concept universally for clustering.
All right, here's a question. What are the minimum addition requirements for the local HA with switchable tape backup and remote DR? What are the minimum additions / requirements for a local HA with switchable tape backup and remote DR?
God, I'm not sure, but you definitely would use, I can't answer that one specifically, but here's what I can say, that BRMS is fully integrated with the PowerHA solution. So I would assume that in the data center you'd have the LUN level switching, you would have the tape devices in the admin domain, and then then to the remote site you would have the global mirror set up, and so basically that tape device would be a resource available to either the primary or the secondary environment, just like user profile, what have you. So when you switch between primary and secondary, that tape device will be present as one of the resources for the application. That's the beauty of the admin domain. And then off at the remote location, I would imagine there would be a BRMS over at that location as well, so that if you want to do save to tape from the remote location, you could execute it from there. Hope I answered that. I'm not exactly.
Yeah, you would also need some of the cluster toolkit features in there because you're going to want to switch the different tape drives and those kind of things.
All right, any other questions? All right, type your questions in the section of the webinar control panel. It's the upper right portion of your screen if you want. And if we don't have any other questions, we should basically get going. So I want to thank Steve. Thank you very much, Steve Finnis, and your time and your great presentation. Of course, Terry Boulay, thank you. If there's anybody out there that needs help or wants questions, has additional questions, please send an email to Terry or call him on 949-468-1406. We do have an offer, a standing offer, what's called PowerHA assessment, which is we do a review of the network's applications, your DR strategy, and we do also the demo of the PowerHA solution as well. So this is a no-cost assessment, but if you're interested, give Terry a call. His email is indicated at the lower portion of the screen, tboulay@keyinfo.com. I want to thank everyone for taking time out. I think it was a great webinar, and we look forward to working with everybody. And again, if you need any of those questions answered, please call Terry. My best to everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.